I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the News du Jour. Happy Thursday. Dang, this week has totally flown past. So like I was telling you guys about yesterday, I am going to be having another round of tests for my glucose levels this morning. And again, the miniature version of this test that was 1 hour was really, really hard on my system. And I'm about to do one that's about 3 to 4 hours. So wish me luck, prayers up, good vibes, whatever you want to send my way. I would really appreciate it because, my system is just different than most people's, and it just reacts strangely sometimes to things, and definitely anything to do with fasting, it's not really my friend. So anyway, I'm going to be fasting from this evening through to tomorrow, and then doing this 3 to 4 hour test, having my blood drawn 4 times. So anyway, wish me luck. It's all in safety for my child. So it is worth doing, absolutely. And just for peace of mind, I've had so many of you moms out there message me that your glucose levels were high the first test, but not for the second one, and that they were completely normal for the second one. So that is what we are shooting for. And I'm really hoping that that will be the case. So keep your fingers crossed for me. Like I also mentioned at the top of yesterday's episode, President Zelensky gave a address to Congress yesterday. So as promised, I will be breaking that down right here at the top of the episode. So we were getting ready to listen to President Zelensky's speech, and knowing that it would be eloquent, impassioned, and that he'd likely be asking for more American assistance. And that's his job right now. And he hit all of those notes in his speech. He referenced Mount Rushmore, 9/11, and Pearl Harbor, hearkening us back to dark times in our own history. But most notably, he touched on the I Have a Dream speech, something that still rings out in the hearts of all Americans. He said that he has a need, though. He has a need to, quote, protect my people from the sky, end quote. Such a poetic and heartbreaking way to put it. He begged U.S. Congress and President Biden to consider establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which is something that NATO allies have been extremely hesitant to grant him because it would effectively bring us into the conflict, as NATO countries would have to be the ones enforcing this no-fly zone by shooting down Russian aircraft. Zelensky also proposed something called U-24, which would be an alliance of 24 countries solely focused on peace. And he said he was calling for this because the existing institutions clearly did not work in preventing this war. Ouch. That's kind of a dig at groups like, the UN, for example. So, who we'll get to them later, a little bit more information about the UN and what they're doing here. But Zelensky also played this gut-wrenching video that showed Ukrainian cities before and after the war began. They showed incredibly graphic images with children being loaded onto gurneys, charred human beings who had likely been burned to death, newborns bleeding from head wounds, pregnant mothers dying as they were evacuated from burning hospitals, and confused children shrieking for their parents in the arms of soldiers. Another thing that they showed in this video that we have not talked about a lot on here is the mass graves in Mariupol, which potentially are going on in other parts of the country as well. But right now, there's just a lot of places in Ukraine. I mean, it's a war zone where funeral services are just not a reality at the moment. So they are legitimately under fire, and the dead have been piling up, and they just cannot leave these people in the streets for moral, ethical, as well as sanitary reasons. So they have been burying people in mass graves, and this is definitely going to make it more difficult for loved ones to find out what happened to their family and friends and where they're buried. These images that they showed will honestly stay in my head forever, and they continue to weigh on my heart as I'm writing and recording this. But it's hard to say what escalating Putin's aggression might result in for the rest of the world, and I think the allies are doing absolutely everything they can right now. Following this speech, Biden came out stronger against Putin and pledged more weapons as well as more funds to Ukraine. He blatantly called Putin a war criminal, and Congress agreed. They passed a resolution unanimously agreeing that Putin is a war criminal for the atrocities that he has committed against Ukrainian civilians, which are escalating. So Russia is intensifying its attacks on civilians while at a loss to take major Ukrainian cities. So the mayor of Kyiv was asked about Putin's claim that he's not hitting civilian areas of the capital city, and the mayor bluntly said, bullshit. He was a former boxing champion, and he simply did not mince words. Putin is actually targeting civilians intentionally, according to the intelligence and the results that we're seeing. It seems like the more that they stall out in trying to take these major cities, the more they are lashing out at civilians. Just yesterday, for example, 10 civilians were shot dead by Russian troops just waiting in line for bread. That is not war by international law. That is murder. And as of now, the UN is only acknowledging 600 civilian deaths in Ukraine when we know that there are in excess of 2,400 in the city of Mariupol alone. So those numbers are extremely low. They're undercounting. And the UN's highest court has officially ordered Putin to stop military action in Ukraine. But hardly anyone believes that this will deter him. And honestly, this action comes too little, too late. The war has been going on for a little bit less than a month now, almost a month. And we know there to be thousands and thousands of deaths on each side of the fight. And lastly, for today, in the way of news about Ukraine, the woman who burst onto the news in Russia was let off pretty easy compared to a lot of protesters. She was actually just issued a fine and allowed to leave. But that said, she was subjected to a 14-hour interrogation and was denied both legal representation as well as contact to her family. She said she did not sleep at all the past 2 days in jail. This treatment is not uncommon in Russia, and frankly, it's not as severe as what other people have experienced, but it's horrible nonetheless and completely unjust. And next up for today, what I'm going to do here is I have 4 kind of mini updates for you guys that I thought were important to touch on. So I'm just going to kind of run through those bullet point style. So first up, daylight savings forever? So those of you who complain every year about daylight savings, you have finally been heard by the powers that be. The Senate has passed something now called the Sunshine Protection Act that would eliminate the fall time change, and therefore there'd be no need to spring forward each year either. We would have daylight saving time permanently. Next, the bill would have to pass the House and then be signed into law by Biden. But should all of that happen, the law would go into effect starting of November of 2023, so next year. Stay tuned on that. And next up in our bullet points, a 7.3 magnitude earthquake hit off the coast of northern Japan, setting off a tsunami advisory and knocked out a ton of people's power. This is the same general area, if you guys remember, that was hit by a horrible tsunami 11 years ago, causing a nuclear plant to melt down. Luckily, this one was not as bad as that, but it definitely was some unwelcome deja vu. Next up, Chris Cuomo is suing CNN for $125 million over what he's calling an unlawful firing. If you remember, Chris Cuomo allegedly used his position as a prominent news reporter for CNN to try to protect his brother, Andrew Cuomo, from bad press. And lastly, for today, the Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized yesterday during Women's Month, which is awesome. When Biden signed it, he used it as a chance to underscore the fact that more needs to be done for women's safety and that we are not there yet. We couldn't agree more. And that is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with a quote. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider becoming a patron of our podcast. For $7.99 a month, you can unlock tons of perks like breaking news text messages so that you're never out of the loop. Tons of bonus episodes are already up there ready for you to binge, and a discussion board full of networking opportunities and much more. Go to www.patreon.com/sugarfreemedia today to become a patron. This is the best way to support our show. Our patrons make News du Jour possible. But a couple other ways to support our podcast are rate and review on whatever podcast platform you use to listen, share on your social media, you have influence, tell your friends, family, and colleagues that you love News du Jour and why you listen. You can also follow us on social media under sugarfreemedia.co on Instagram, just sugarfreemedia, all one word, on TikTok, and sugarfree_media on Twitter. We also have a weekend newsletter called Dreamers Digest that's full of dreamy content recommendations for your weekend and a life update from yours truly. Sign up today on our website, www.sugarfreemedia.co. Our music is by Joey Lavoie and Nicholas Foster. Our cover art is by Hannah Pierce Photography. Our Sugar Free Media logo is by Catherine Jezik Designs. Any twinkling or little footsteps you might hear in the background are by my dog, Rhett. He's a rescue pup and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from